Welcome back, friends. It's nice to see you again. I don't know if you go through the same thing that I do, but every once in a while I get an itch to read a favorite poet. And I return to his works almost as a form of ritual, to get inspiration or even just for that sense of nostalgia. I'm going to be reading to you one of William Butler Yeats' poems. I've actually got the collection here. This is all of his poems. Handsome guy. So this poem I actually first discovered pretty early in my, I guess you could say, poetic career. And it was in a class that I was taking, just something extracurricular to gain credit hours towards my Bachelor of Science in Nursing degree. And it was online, and we had a pretty good professor, and she took a bit of an interest in my analysis of this poem because it just captured me. Like, I poured everything into this simple essay, which should have been just kind of a nothing, easy A sort of thing. But I took it very seriously because I think this poem deserves to be taken seriously. There's some poems which, when you read them, you think they can't be improved upon. It's like they almost were received from heaven in a complete package, and to alter any of the words would be to do injustice to it. This is one of those poems. You may even already have a sense of which one I'm talking about. It's probably the one for which Yeats is most popular. And, he's a very accomplished poet. He won the Pulitzer Prize, I believe, in literature, or maybe the Nobel Prize. I think it's the Nobel Prize in literature for his poems. This particular poem was 1921, so he's writing in the aftermath of the First World War, and he also grew up in Ireland, lived in London for a time, but Ireland was kind of where his heart was at, and there was, of course, distress there as well. So this is really a reflection, and I think him processing all of that trauma, that worldwide trauma. So I'm going to be reading it for you, and you might even want to pull up, after you watch this video, a wonderful rendition of it on YouTube. If I think to, I'll link it in the comments. It has these beautiful animations to go along with it, and whoever they got to read it is just the perfect voice for it. I wish I could do it as much justice as he did, but I'm going to do my best. It's so dramatic that it forces you to read it violently, with a passion. And so that's what I hope to do. It's called The Second Coming. It's a short poem, but definitely very dense. And it uses some biblical language almost heretically. It's a very difficult poem to grasp because you almost have to have one foot in the occult world, which he definitely was steeped in, and then also one foot in Christianity because of these deeply biblical undertones. So without further ado, I'll read it for you, and we'll break it down a little bit, as always. The Second Coming. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming, hardly are those words out when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in the sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow thighs, while all about it, real shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born? Oh my goodness. So this is one poem that just kind of grabs you by the chest and shakes you. It's, at I guess first pass, at first blush, It's about the second coming of Christ. But it's really not. He had this theory that, and it's an occult theory, that the world goes through these eras, these cycles of birth and death and then rebirth, accompanied by great tumult towards the end, and then something greater happens at the second or third or fourth iteration of this cycle. I don't know where he would place the first cycle, but certainly he makes reference to, the Christian era in here. Towards the end, he says that 20 centuries, there you go, of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. That would be, of course, Christ's cradle. So that's kind of the 20 centuries that he's talking about, that time period. And then, so if that's the start, the end would be what's happening with the First World War and all the distress. He says very poignantly in the first few verses, turning and turning in the widening gyre. So already we're seeing that spinning. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. The falcon would be us, be sort of humanity. The falconer would be God, or whatever he roots his spirituality in, that access upon which the spiritual world revolves. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. We see this entropy just spiraling and spiraling out of control. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world, and that was definitely a time of anarchy. Blood dim tide, so we're talking war here. The ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction. You can sense how frustrated he was with the good people who stood by during the war and let things happen, and the worst full of passionate intensity. So it's very clearly foreshadowing too for the Second World War. We see Hitler fits this description perfectly. The worst are full of passionate intensity, the best lack all conviction. I'm thinking of that other famous poem, or I don't even know if it's a poem, but definitely a quote, first they came, and then they came for me. And there was no one left standing to help me. So definitely prophetic. And then it moves on here. I don't know if you can see that, there's sort of two verses. It's bifurcated. And the second starts like this. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. So he says, if this isn't the end of an era, what possibly could be? Hardly are those words out when a vast image of spiritus mundi, that's sort of his word for the collective unconscious, and it troubles his sight. Somewhere in the sands of the desert, goodness, here comes his personification of this beast. Again, he's stealing biblical language and twisting it, sort of contorting it. So it's a shape with lion body and the head of a man, so sort of a sphinx creature, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun. So this thing's coming to enact judgment, I guess. It's moving its slow thighs while all about it real shadows of the indignant desert birds. Once again, we have, these falcons. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare. So now he's realizing what this is all about. This is the closing of an age and perhaps the world itself. And it's slouching towards Bethlehem to be born. So it all comes back to Christ. It all comes back to Christ. So from a biblical or Christian standpoint, it doesn't quite hit the nail on the head. If you're looking at your eschatology, the second coming of Christ is going to be very violent, but it's also going to be very beautiful for the believers. We're of course going to receive our glorified bodies, resurrect with Christ into heaven. And so I think if I were to put a label on this, I would say it's an end times poem, but stripped of its sort of Christian birthright. It's definitely something to think about, though, something to consider. Yeats is one of those poets that you can't put very neatly into one box or another. That style of poetry is one of my favorite, though. I just think no one really does it better than him. I've tried, actually. I've never even come close to accomplishing what he did there in that poem. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I'll definitely see you next time with another poem. Take care.